to the Doulas No Squat Book Club. This week we are discussing Deliver, a concise guide to helping the woman you love through labor. We'll be covering topics including helping clients to labor down, the importance of the pushing stage in the golden hour, and how to prepare clients for potential complications. Thank you so much for joining us, and let's get ready to hear from some doulas who know squat.
Made our point. We're in the same boat here. All right, chapter 10. Complete change of topics. How do you encourage your clients to labor down? Do you feel that it is your place to encourage clients to labor down? Can you describe what labor down is?
I want to know what exactly you're referring to as labor down.
Okay, so I'll explain what labor down is. Okay, so waiting to push until your body has an overwhelming need to do so is one definition of laboring down. Another one is saying and wait until baby is at +1 station, which means that their head, it's by an inch from the pelvis. So we're in negative station up here, positive station once they've gone past the pelvis into the vaginal canal. So we're at +1 here, and then we're at +2 here, +3, and then plus more than that is born, generally.
For me, in most cases, I would advise just feeling when your body wants to push, like breathing through, letting your body push the baby out, not necessarily applying a bunch of extra effort into the pushing process. But that all goes out the window if we're having issues with like baby heart tones or something and the baby needs to be born quickly. The best way to get that baby out with the least amount of trauma to mom is going to be to breathe through it, let the baby let your body move that baby out naturally as much as it can, and like taking your time with pushing.
Yeah, so there's definitely a lot to be said about either not pushing yourself or letting air out while you push. Every pelvic floor therapist that I've ever discussed the topic with has said, let the air out. When you hold it is when you tear. The only reason to hold it is if we're in a hurry for some reason. There's a medical reason that this baby needs to be born soon. Which actually, interestingly, there's always a question of maternal exhaustion. Do you put in a ton of effort to get baby born quickly? Because that's exhausting. Or do you sleep in between contractions because they tend to space out and you can get little 10-minute naps, which adds up. Especially if you're just letting your body do it on its own and you're not putting in a ton of push effort. It's slower. You will be in labor longer. But you actually can sleep through that. I slept through it in my first, granted I only had 2 pushes. So I pushed, fell asleep, pushed. I pushed, fell asleep, and pushed. And I've had clients fall asleep because they are so tired at that point. Normally it's either like a really long labor or someone was really excited in their early labor. Which is why we want you to rest. But so for me, the verbiage that I always use is, relax if my client's okay with using the term relax. And then I like to say, don't fight yourself. And say there's no reason to fight yourself. Because people do get an early urge to push, especially first-time moms. A lot of times when I hear that, I'm like, oh, I feel like I need to poop and I'm feeling pushy. That tells me mentally, I'm like, they're probably like starting transition or like just shy of for a lot of first time moms. Because when you're feeling that urge, the baby's actually still pretty hot. We want them to move down even past that feeling before you start really pushing, because we don't want your cervix to swell from the pushing.
Yeah. That can cause problems, but
yes, I've only had one birth where that happened, and then what ended up having to be done to get baby out was the midwife actually put her hands into the mom and pushed the swollen cervix out of the way. And then mom pushed the baby through because it was no longer dilating because it was swollen. You don't want that. That's not comfortable. So don't push on a not dilated cervix, please. Okay. How do you explain the difference between your 10 centimeters and it's time to push? Because it's not the same thing.
Yeah, it can. A lot of times you can have like this break where you can get a rest. Really, I don't advocate for like just pushing because someone says that it's time to push. It's more of a the letting, because your body's going to put your uterus is going to contract and that baby is going to get pushed out by your body eventually. So it's the letting your body push that baby out when you some people can feel the baby moving down the birth canal while others are like, it's just, there's a lot of sensations going on. They don't really recognize that feeling. But if they can like feel the baby moving down that birth canal, that can be a like working with your body to push that baby out.
Yeah, and it feels really cool. I felt it both times. I had a client one time, as her baby was moving down her birth canal, he got the hiccups. She was like, nope, don't like that. And she's like, now I feel the urge to push, but just because that's uncomfortable. Like, don't push because your baby has hiccups.
And then like that ring of fire sensation that a lot of people feel, it can be kind of hard not to want to push through that to get like it over with, but also like kind of breathing through that sensation to allow your body to expand on its own.
Slow and steady wins that race. Yeah, that's something you want it to have a little bit of tension to stretch and then a little bit of relief and tension to stretch, and that each time it's stretching, it's not tearing, which is our preference. It's so uncomfortable at the time, and I know, like we know, but if you can breathe through it and you can, allow your body to do its nice slow stretch, then you will be so grateful that you did as soon as it's over.
I find that to be a time that is very helpful for visualization and mantras. Just like you are opening up, you are allowing your body is expanding to fit your baby, or like whatever you just need to like getting into that mindset of allowing gentle expansion, or like however I personally have a hard time with some of the more flowery language visualizations.
Yeah, me too.
I don't feel authentic saying them. So, but some people like to do like the flower metaphor and stuff like that, and that could be helpful for some people.
Yeah, and a lot of times I don't use it as a metaphor because that doesn't feel authentic to me, and if I'm not feeling authentic, my client's gonna know I'm not being authentic and it won't work. But I have just described an opening flower. And so like really in depth of even describing what color the petals are and how the gradient changes and what it smells like and what is happening as it's opening. And that can be really distracting and helpful and just really beautiful. And a lot of times clients later will be like, that was for everybody was really beautiful. But I find as soon as instead of just saying, I want you to picture a flower opening, if I start saying you are a flower opening, I lose my authenticity, and people can tell. People can tell when you're not being authentic a good portion of the time, unless you're just really good at masking, and I can be. I don't most of the time. It's not my natural state of. You know what they say, practice makes perfect, and I don't practice. So that is that. Okay, how do you protect the golden hour?
Getting people out of the room that don't need to be.
True statement. If they don't need to be there, then they can leave. And other than that, that's pretty protective right there. And that can include you, doula. Maybe you don't need to be there. Maybe they need some time. Maybe your job is to stand outside the room, outside the door.
Guard that door.
And just, oh, they're taking people right now. You know, and let them have some time as a family. I take a lot of pictures during golden hour, so I'm not necessarily, normally my clients still want me to stay with them. But I'm always prepared to leave if they want. After home, I actually find interesting. A lot of times it's hard to protect the golden hour. Because I find that they want to take a lot of vitals a lot of times. It just depends on who the midwife is. But so they'll be like, I want you to hold the baby, but I also want to mess with you a ton while you're holding the baby. So depends on who the midwife is. But yeah, that's great. That's great advice. If they don't need to be there, get them out. Love it.
Yeah, and I mean, getting that baby skin to skin with one of the parents as soon as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Preferably and immediately.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, baby. Yeah, I always encourage my clients to take their bras off while they're pushing. So we don't want to try to get this out of the way while I'm trying to hand you a limp baby. Let's just already have it gone. Let's just lay that baby down, do the breast crawl, we'll all hang out, talk about how adorable it is. That's always fun for me. As far as like the shots and stuff, if you're choosing to do that, the erythromycin, really don't like it when they do that during the golden hour.
There's really no reason that they have to.
No, because then it makes the baby's vision all blurry, and you're trying to breastfeed and the baby can't see. That's not cool.
It can be, it can impact bonding whenever they can't see you very well during that time, because like, I mean, visual cues are important too.
Yeah, human beings are visual. A lot of us are very visual. I mean, obviously we can use our other senses and people learn different ways, but if the baby is born, and like that's the whole reason our areolas get so dark. It's like a big old bullseye for the baby. And then making sure the baby can't see as well. It's really working against nature.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty much everything can be put off for an hour or two. I prefer to.
Yeah. Yeah. There's some places I've practiced where they're starting to push the golden hour actually to 3 hours. And I'm there for it. Anytime they're like, we're not going to mess with you for the next like 3 hours other than the fundal massage, which is when they massage the uterus to make sure it's clamped down. Whether or not it needs to happen, up for debate. Anyway. I did not have a fundal massage with my first. Nothing happened. I had fundal massage with my second, and I about kicked the nurse in the head. You dang. And she goes, we have to do this. I said, clearly you don't, because this did not happen with my first birth. And she was like, well, it's because you had a baby at home.
I mean,
make your uterus any different? Just saying.
like, for some people, if they're like the cascade of hormones was interrupted, or like there was a bunch of interventions, maybe a fundal massage is going to benefit them. But like, if you didn't have any interruptions, if you're breastfeeding, your hormones are more than likely going to do their job of clamping that uterus.
Yeah, and they want to see like if blood is pooling in the vaginal canal, and then pushing it pushes it, all that jazz. there's reasons for it. We're not saying throw the baby out with the bathwater, but we are saying about it. Learn. See if it's actually necessary. And especially if they're wanting to do it every 15 minutes, which is interrupting the golden hour.
So do your research. Like your clients should have information available to them in order to make an informed decision.
No such thing as informed consent without the information. And that's the hill I will die on. All right. Those are all of the chapters. Appendix 1, I did have a question for, and I believe Appendix 2 is just a birth plan, which is great. It was an example birth plan, but we really covered birth intentions pretty well last week, and then it was a hospital packing list for Appendix 3. You really don't need to bring much. It's basically, your own personal hygiene products, but even then you can always request. You really don't have to pack very much at all. They pretty much have the stuff there. So Appendix 1 was complications and interventions. And I thought it was really interesting that they put that in an appendix instead of its own chapter. It's a chapter. Chapter 11. Complications and interventions. And I just kind of want to go through these and kind of do a quick, what do you do to prepare for this for your clients, or do you? Induction. To prepare clients for inductions? For the potential induction, if there's no sign that they're going to be having one?
I mean, usually they'll have there's signs, but it's possible for like preeclampsia to come on unexpectedly. So it's good to like familiarize clients with the induction options if it were to become a thing. And a lot of times you'll have providers that maybe like just suggest induction because they're about to go on holiday and you want to have unless you want to have a different provider at your birth.
Right. Or they quote the ARRIVE study, the one study in the history of studies that shows that induction at 39 weeks is helpful. One. And I have no idea how they came. Like, I look at them like, this is a good study. I don't know how it came to this conclusion, because I've never seen a 39-week induction be like, it was better. Ever. But okay.
I think it's important to give everyone information on like benefits of induction and the different methods of induction. Just like they may not just call you if their provider is like, we're going to induce at one of their prenatal appointments. You may not be able to give them that information before they've made a decision.
And you want to be able to give them that information before it's brought up by the doctors, in my opinion, because I want my clients to be able to ask informed questions. If it's the first time that you've heard of something and you've got a timed appointment slot, it's more likely that you're going to get better information if you already know the basics. So when they start telling you the basics and you go, okay, but also I know about this and this, and then they have a full conversation instead of just a half one. I like for all of this to go into my birth plan / intentions. Because, I put an order of preference, and the only way that they can have an order of preference is if they're informed on it. So that's in my pre-recorded childbirth ed class that all of my clients get to watch as part of having me as a doula. And then we sit down and I say, okay, you watched the class. Now we're doing the birth plan, birth intentions. Let's go through this. Do you have any questions? Tell me what your preferences are. And then it ends up being generally a pretty fast conversation because they've already learned a lot from my class. But I think it's important for people to know because it does get brought up quite a bit. Okay. Meconium. The possibility of meconium being passed while the baby is still in utero. Is that something that you talk to your clients about?
It's not really something that I've talked about much. I've had some experiences if like the baby is breech and during like the manual manipulation that meconium is sometimes passed during that time. But that's not like a common experience that I've had with clients.
I don't bring it up. The thing is, there's too many options for things that can happen, and the likelihood that it's going to happen, and then the likelihood that it's going to be a problem, it's just not up there. And it's kind of one of those things where, like, if meconium is in the water when it breaks, it's very obvious. Like, it's green, it stinks, you know. And so you don't really need to have been told beforehand that that's not right. It's like, I've never had a client whose waters broke and it was green and smelly that didn't go, oh, that's wrong. Like, they know. And so you didn't need to spend your time on. There's so many other things that are more likely to be relevant. So no, I don't spend time checking. So I think that's interesting. You and I both agree. We're like, nah. Not that one. I mean, you can read this book and read all about it. I do. I prepare my clients by giving them this.
I mean, just stating the taco thing, like what you, if your water breaks, the things to pay attention to. But like, I mean, that's included.
Is it clear and does it have a smell? Done.
Yeah.
If your water broke because you were having sex, then it's gonna have a smell. But you just inform your practitioner and they ask like, yeah, but the reason probably is because, and they'll giggle. Just like she just did. And they're like, oh, okay, never mind. Okay, C-section.
Yes, definitely. I mean, there's always that possibility. I mean, in the United States, there's a very strong possibility that you could end up in a C-section. So knowing what your options are, if that happens beforehand, helps to eliminate like
Absorbed trauma.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that, when it comes to C-sections, I always say I'm expecting the best and I'm preparing for all case scenarios. I don't expect you to have a C-section unless you're expecting to have a C-section. But it's good to go over anyway, and taking the time to do that and having that on my birth intentions of the different options has really helped a lot of my clients that do end up, not a lot of my clients have C-sections, but the ones that do, so remember this is still your birth. It's a belly birth, but it's still your birth. And remember, you chose these options, and it gives a sense of control back.
I mean, like, just knowing that you have options in that OR, like, a lot of people may not think that they have any options.
Exactly. And so we can really help with that by taking the time to do that beforehand. Okay, interventions for an assisted delivery. So that's where we're talking about like vacuum or forceps.
I mean, yeah, if the clients aren't aware of what some of those look like, just describing them and what some of the pros and cons, but like the types of assisted delivery that is used is more often determined by what the provider is most comfortable with. But just being aware of what could happen if that was needed, or why it could be needed, or why you may want to, or what options do you have if it's suggested.
Yeah, and risks, pros, cons. It's pretty simple to just refer to a video. People learn visually. That's another thing that I do put in the birth intentions. I give them the option to decide only if medically necessary, or I would rather have a C-section. Because some people would, and it's your birth, and you get to decide. So support whatever your preference is. Most people don't want it unless if it's not medically necessary. I did have one client decide that she wanted it when it hadn't been stated as medically necessary. The provider offered it quite randomly, in my opinion. But episiotomy.
Yeah. I personally don't think that episiotomies should ever be done. Very rarely. And though some providers may be more happy with them than others. Just giving information on that so that they're not surprised if have no idea what it is if it's mentioned, or if God forbid a provider just goes and starts to cut them without saying anything.
That used to happen a lot more than it does, from my understanding. I've only seen one episiotomy. She asked permission before she did it, and it was done because the medical professional had started intervening, and then the baby still wasn't out. And because those interventions were done, the likelihood that the baby had suffered trauma from those interventions was pretty high. And so the baby needed to get out immediately. And so she said, we don't have time to stretch. So then she...
so I don't really hear about providers doing episiotomies as often.
No, it seems to be, for the most part, thankfully, as a last resort of, we don't have time to stretch. We need to just manually open that door to let the baby out because X, Y, or Z has happened. Generally something to do with heart tones, blood pressures, something like that. So that's the one and only time that I've seen it happen, and my client gave full consent before.
I feel like that's one of the things that have been the evidence on it is actually catching up to
medical professionals. You adapted. We're so proud of you. Thankfully, I have a mentor doula who's been doing it for a very long time, and she actually has a scar on her hand from where she put her hand in the way when she saw a doctor going to cut her client without permission. And I was like, man, that's crazy. I've never had to do anything even kind of. So I appreciate the trailblazers who have made a difference for those of us now. That I just haven't seen it. But I do still have that on my birth intentions list of only if medically necessary. And some people feel so strongly about it, they're like, no, it's never medically necessary. Wait. In that instance, I could definitely see where it was the one time that I've seen it happen.
But I think that you can make a case for it rarely in certain specific situations.
And that's how I feel about a lot of interventions. They have their place. And when it is necessary, thank God we have them, you know? But when they're not, don't use them. And then maybe people won't feel so badly about these different options because you won't see their side effects quite so often because they won't be used as often. You know how that kind of snowballs. All right. So that is Deliver, a concise guide to helping the woman you love through labor. Jamie, do you want to tell us about our next book?
Sure. So our next book we'll be reading Breastfeeding Without Birthing. And this is going to be so great. A lot of the stuff in here is also very applicable to birthing parents as well, as far as for those experiencing low milk supply. There's a little bit of a idea these days that low birth supply isn't a real thing, which is weird.
No. No, it's real. When it's empty, then there's nothing there. It's not there. I can tell you right now. Don't tell me it's not real. I experienced it. Thank you very much.
So for next month's book club, we'll be reading through the chapter 1 and section 1. These this is going to be about support network.
Oh, fantastic. Okay. So, next month, have read Breastfeeding Without Birthing, only chapter 1.
No, chapter 1 and section 1.
Chapter 1 and section 1. They are different. I'll take a picture of this and put it on there. Okay. So chapter 1 and section 1. If you don't get the reading, that's okay. Show up anyway, because as you have probably picked up by now, you don't actually have to do the reading. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, and I hope that you guys all have a wonderful rest of your week.